Hi, I'm your host, Brent. Welcome to the Climate Guru, where we discuss pressing environmental issues, including with leading experts. Join us for insightful conversations to inform and inspire action in your everyday life.
Hi, this is Brent, the Climate Guru. We've often thought about what's the best place to live in the United States as we face the problems, the vagaries of climate change, increased heat, sea level rise, high humidity, hurricanes, wildfires. Where's the best place in the country for the next several decades as we get into towards the end of the century in particular for you and your family to live to avoid the worst effects of climate change? There's a number of issues that have been discussed by climate scientists, geographers, and one of the issues obviously is heat. Right now, the United States, different regions have heated an average of 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels since the 1970s. Temperatures have increased some places. We have, particularly in the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, where the temperatures are often above 100 degrees. Places like Florida, it's warm, it's 2 degrees. We also have humidity that adds to it. So one issue is temperature. And where are you best to survive really increases in temperature that will continue towards the end of the century gradually. And really, we're looking at another probably 5 degrees. We're looking at 5 degrees above where we were 70 or 80 years ago. Right now, we're about 2.5, 3 degrees in some places. So 5 degrees is quite a bit. Heavy rains, deluges, droughts. How will droughts affect the area where you live? Will there be sufficient water for farming, for consumption, for families, for industry? Are there going to be huge areas where there's desertification because of droughts and lack of water? How about the wildfires? You want to stay in an area that's not prone to wildfires. Sea level rise. We know that the oceans on average have gone up about 10 inches in the last 100 years, going up about 1/4 of an inch a year. And climate scientists predict that by the end of the century, we could be looking at another 3 feet, possibly even 6 feet increase in sea level rise, which really would be devastating for coastal communities. These are some of the issues that much of the country will be facing as we get into the next few decades, and especially towards the end of the century. There are 3 areas really which are recommended for living in the safest place where you escape the worst effects of climate change. One of them is the Great Lakes region, the upper Midwest, which is considered a climate haven because of the abundance of fresh water, lower susceptibility to extreme heat, no hurricanes, so no sea level rise risk. Wildfires are minimal in those areas. At Duluth, Minnesota, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Madison, Wisconsin, Buffalo, New York. These are areas that could be very safe. Minnesota, Michigan, even in areas of Illinois. Areas along the Great Lakes where there's no issue of water availability. Another area that's strongly recommended is the northern part of New England, particularly the states of Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, in the inland areas that are not susceptible to sea level rise. You're not going to have the extreme heat in those areas. Inland areas, you're not going to have susceptibility to hurricanes, wildfires. There's plenty of water. So that's another area that could become very popular. In Vermont today, people are moving to Vermont. They say 1/3 of the people in Vermont have moved there in recent years because of concerns about climate change. That's a remarkable number. Another area would be the Pacific Northwest, especially areas that are a little further from the coast that are not going to be affected by sea level rise. You're not going to have the heat. You don't have the issues of hurricanes. Wildfires are less than they are in the more southern regions. And so those are the 3 areas, the upper Midwest, Great Lakes area, northern New England, especially the inland areas, and the Northwest, especially in the Northwest and the inland areas. So what are the things that we're looking for? Obviously, we want to escape the extreme heat, which we'll be looking at wildfires, hurricanes, sea level rise. And we also want to look at what area are you going to be the most comfortable in terms of dealing with natural disasters, dealing with catastrophes. What are the social and economic issues that are going to affect an area where you live? Is it a community that helps those that have been struck down by natural disasters? Is it a community that has a history and a willingness and an inclination to help others who need assistance in times of crisis? Is it a community that doesn't have extreme poverty, that doesn't have a lot of conflicts because of crime, high levels of crime, extreme poverty, social discord, and conflict? You want to be in areas that don't have a history of that. What type of infrastructure has the city built? Are they strong? Do they have good public transportation? Is there good health care, hospitals? Has there been planning in this community to deal with the issues of climate change? Planning to help the community, planning to resist and the resilience of climate change that's necessary. Is there clean water, clean air? Is there proactive urban planning, investment in climate resilience? These are the issues that really are going to affect what's a good place to live. And is there economic diversity? In other words, if the climate changes in the area where you live, and that climate, the economy in that area is dependent on a certain type of climate, for example, winter tourism, because it's cool. In climate change, you won't have that. How about farming? Is the area where you're going a major farming belt? Certain crops fail because of changes in temperature. So these are the good things to consider when you're considering climate change. So it's not just the heat, it's not just natural and physical things, it's also the socioeconomic factors to consider when you move to a new area. And so we can consider that inland, Pacific Northwest, especially the higher elevations, Spokane, Boise, Seattle are good cities. In the upper Midwest, we're talking about Madison, Wisconsin. We're talking about the Twin Cities and Duluth. Now, the other issue is insurability. There's a big concern that homes around the country will not be insurable because of the risks of extreme weather and climate change. Are you in an area where your home can be insured, where there's a lower risk of natural disasters that can affect your home and subsequently make it uninsurable, which will mean that your property will have very little value. And that's going to affect the tax base in your area. If homes are uninsurable, if they don't have value, if real estate doesn't have value, the tax base is eroded and there's not money for basic services in that community, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be hospitals, whether it be local government. So that's another issue to consider. That's what we're looking at, and people are considering that, and they're considering where are the worst places to live. I can tell you this, some of the worst places to live would be along some of the coasts, and particularly in the Gulf regions, from Louisiana to Alabama to Mississippi, Florida. These are areas that are going to be affected the worst by sea level rise. It's anticipated by 2050, 2060. Miami, the Gulf Coast of Florida, Tampa, those areas will be 60% underwater. The mid-Atlantic states are going to have the same problem with sea level rise. And the Gulf states are going to have the same issue with sea level rise and also extreme heat. Because in the Gulf states, Florida all the way to Louisiana, Alabama, and so on, not only do they have very high temperatures that are increasing, but you have very high humidity. And that's the heat index, a combination of both temperature and humidity, which makes a very unhealthy atmosphere. In Florida, people have to move inland. Florida has a very low elevation everywhere, but the coastal areas would become uninhabitable, as will most of the Gulf states are along the shore. That's what we have. California, depends on where you are on the West Coast. Southern California has exposure to extreme wildfires. There's some little pockets. They're not as bad, but that's what we're facing. What is the population where you are thinking about moving to? Is it a population that's tenable? Is it a population that is so great that it's very difficult to deal in a situation of a crisis? So the social issues are important. The economic issues are important. The attitude of the people, their willingness to help one another in times of crisis is also a major issue. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.